Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Knight of RICS. I work within the regulation standards and thought leadership part of RICS, and one of my roles, given my overall drive to look at the impact of data and technology on the built and natural environment, is this RICS Tech Partner Program, where we work with a number of data and tech organizations right around the world to really understand the opportunities and risks of using data and technology. And I'm delighted today to be talking to Cyril Theret from Real Quality Ratings. So Cyril, please join me. Welcome, Cyril.
Thank you, Andrew.
Great to have you on board. And I guess the question I almost inevitably ask everybody on our first kind of video episode with our partners is, who are Real Quality Rating? Why was it set up? Give us some background on yourself and your colleagues and the kind of skills and experience you're bringing to what RQR does.
Right, so RQR stands for Real Quality Rating. We are a property rating agency for essentially investment grade properties. RQR was set up about 3 or 4 years ago now, and it has been set up to essentially provide an independent view of the quality of assets within given markets. What really differentiates RQR from other rating methods that exist, whether they are in-house or others, is the fact that the rating is based on the market, i.e. it is based on us sending surveys to the market, to real estate market participants, and to reveal what is perceived as contributing to values.
And what's your background? I know your colleague Olivier are kind of key drivers at RQR. What kind of background and skills have you brought to this endeavor?
So the company was founded by Olivier, and Olivier has got a background in real estate asset management. He's worked for 20 years in Tokyo within Nomura and LaSalle, where he has had responsibilities within research and strategy, and then moved on to MSCI as an MD for France and Southern Europe, and then later on to essentially head up globally the head of real estate index research, and then went on to create RQR, partly from the demand from that emerged from real estate investment managers. For myself, I joined RQR about 2 years ago. My background is 20 years in financial services in London. I work mostly with exchanges, and in my later life got involved with the real estate investment trust market, so with listed REITs.
Great, thanks, Cyril. And you mentioned investment grade properties. Is that just office, or are you looking at retail, logistics, and what kind of jurisdictions have you been getting this data from?
So we started initially with offices, and today we've rated over 2,000 properties across the whole of Europe in most investment cities. So we've expanded our models to now have logistics and also retail, and we're just in the final phase of launching our resi model, built to rent model. Having said that, this is where we have a track record. We've also started to develop the models, particularly the office model, both in Croatia and also in North America.
So essentially, as I understand it, you're essentially turning what some people might see as qualitative attributes of property, their people's view of condition and location and attractiveness, into actually more quantitative data. Can you explain, without having to go into too much kind of technical detail, what you're doing there and what kind of technology you're doing to turn these attributes into effectively scores?
Yeah, so what we get from the surveys from the real estate market participants, and the range of people that we interview range from the people who create the offers, so the asset owners themselves, the asset managers, but also property managers, facility managers, architects on the one hand, and also on the other hand, the tenants, people looking to obviously occupy these properties. And what we get from that is that we get we get all the attributes which are seen as contributing to value. And then we create a model about which attributes contribute what and what the weights are of these attributes. And with that model, for example, the office model has got about 150 characteristics, which essentially measure the overall quality of assets. And they are effectively, we measure the quality of the location of a building. We measure the quality of the build structure of a building, but also of the workspace. That is I would say, the traditional view of real estate. Those attributes that we score, we can also essentially position them into a sustainability outlook. So we're able to measure the economic utility impact, the social utility impact, but also the environmental utility impact. And having essentially rated all those properties or scored those properties, we're able to rank them in a given market, and we rank them against the prime level. So we define what is a prime level in a given market or sub-market. And the prime, what the prime reflects are what are the best attributes that are available in that given market. So it's not a single building, but rather a composite index of all the best attributes in that market. So in a way, what we measure is really what is the resilience of the assets. So how are they positioned against the prime level, and that rating is on a traditional scale, like a credit rating scale, from E to AAA. And that allows us to do the bridge between what is the quality of the assets, what are the resilience of those assets, versus financial indicators like headline rents or cap rates. The process of scoring these assets is fairly straightforward. So as you mentioned, we get access to qualitative data points. So it's things like what are the height of the ceilings, etc. What is the quality of the connectivity within a building, or what is, for example, the walking distance between a tube station and the building itself. And so therefore, by measuring that, we then transform that into quantitative data points, which allows us to score the buildings. And the score of the buildings are out of 1,000 points.
Now, you used a word, Cyril, that triggered obviously an interest from the RICS perspective. You used that word value. What's the relevance and the connectivity to the kind of valuation process, IVS Redbook with what you do, and how you see that supporting the valuation process?
So thank you. It's a very interesting question. Essentially, the starting point, I think, is within VPS2 during inspections or investigations or records that a valuer may conduct when they're valuing a building. So this gives them access to a standard which provides an independent view. So it's not our view of what is the quality of a building, but rather the market's view of what is the quality of that building. And that, from a valuer perspective, can also be audited. So we capture the data, and then valuers can also check, audit where that data is coming from. And it provides a standard. Therefore, it provides a consistency in an approach of investigating buildings. The next point to values is that, therefore, that allows to go beyond just location and to take all the other determinants of values. And in particular, in a world where essentially the demand from tenants is changing, whether this is because of environmental issues or, for example, how the workspace is being used, the valuers effectively can take all that into account. And the final point relates to value creation, the impact of CapEx plans or investment plans in a building. Because, of course, if we know what is the score of the building today within the market. What we also know, what we can tell the clients are, what is the total potential improvement in that building, given the constraints linked to the build structure or linked to the location of the building. So we can actually tell them, calculate for them return on investment, i.e. What will be the impact on the score, on the resilience of the asset of an investment plan, and what will be the impact on that on projected headline rents or cap rates, and provide statistical evidence on those investments.
So it sounds like you're able to not only help the valuation process itself, but look at the effect of various interventions on future score, and thus the impact of that score on valuation, if I understand that correctly, Cyril.
That's correct.
And how about sort of, from the valuation process, from the perspective of sort of comparables, is your scoring able to kind of help that kind of comparable evidence type process to make the valuer's job even hopefully easier and more accurate by looking at these other pieces of evidence?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a database, as I said, of about 2,000, over 2,000 assets today, and essentially we're able to do comparables based on location, all the way down to the actual attribute. So we know what are the strengths of a particular building, what are the weaknesses, and adjust the values according to these strengths and weaknesses. So it is also, from an asset management point of view, a tool that helps the asset managers to identify area of improvement, and also, therefore, where should I be focusing my investment? Where am I going to get where am I going to create the most value out of that? So from a value perspective, to come back to the original question, it is about really improving, essentially helping to assist in the choice of comparables based on that common standard.
And from that point of view, are those two groups your main audiences for using this, the asset managers and the valuers? Do you see those as the main kind of audience for utilizing these ratings, and indeed, obviously, asset managers providing you with some of the data, presumably?
Yes, so we've started with the asset management community as a tool that assists the decision-making process. Our rating can be obviously applied at a asset level, but also at a fund level. So we're able to rate an entire fund. So we've moved into fund management. And now we're moving with the valuers, because obviously there's demand from the asset management community for these ratings to be included, to be part of the valuing process.
Now, you used a word earlier that I thought was very interesting. You talked about kind of resilience of the asset. What do you almost understand by that phrase, and how does your scoring support that concept of resilience, that almost future-looking, I guess, is what you're implying there, that future-looking resilience?
So there are two reasons why essentially the score and the rating of an asset may move over time. The first one is obviously our models are reviewed on an annual basis to make sure that new attributes that may emerge, linked, for example, to changes in the way people come to the office, or in environmental matters, which are now a big focus. And also they can move because of the weights that we attribute to each attribute that we score. So that's one of the reasons for the score to change over time. And the second, obviously, is the rating, which changes with the prime. In markets where standing assets are being renovated, are changing, or where there's a lot of new constructions, obviously the prime levels will change. And so therefore, every time that you position an asset against either a prime that's changing, or the new model on a yearly basis, what it shows is, is how is your asset future-proof, i.e., what are the trajectory that you're taking, and obviously by highlighting this time not the strengths of the asset that you would use in a commercial environment, but the weaknesses of the asset. You identified where you are potentially behind the market and where you need to make the investments, and that contributes to the future proofing of the assets on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, no, I understand. And the next question is so important from the stakeholders I talk to often, is this whole area of the kind of sustainability, and obviously it links to that resilience piece in terms of some of the factors, but obviously there's a lot of perhaps concern is the right word, particularly from asset and portfolio managers, to think about how their assets are going to be either giving a green premium or a brown discount, a brown haircut, or in extreme circumstances, how they might find themselves with stranded assets. What are you seeing in terms of the data drivers that people are beginning to use to kind of help them understand this green premium, this brown discount, this risk of stranded assets? What are people putting literally value on? What are the scores telling you about these factors?
Well, we've seen an increased focus on environmental, factors, and in particular to do with energy consumption and things like that. I guess that is driven partly by new regulation coming into place, but also tenants themselves who want to essentially be in buildings which are green. The challenge today is twofold. One is for the asset management community is how do you transform standing assets? So how do you make those investments? Because you have obviously a number of constraints. They could be to do with the actual build structure of the building, but they could also be because you have existing tenants in those buildings. And also, how do you measure the impact of those investments? And because sustainability, as I mentioned at the beginning, is an integral part of the data that we capture. It's not something which is separate. Then it is in the determinants of values, and therefore you can measure what is the impact of your sustainability investment.
And given that clearly in many markets around the world, I'm going to bring up the dreaded COVID, are you seeing any significant changes, early feedback yet in terms of what constitutes a good score now, given changing working patterns, hybrid working? Are you seeing already some kind of quantitative statistics coming back from the people you talk to about how real estate, particularly offices, I'm thinking, are going to have to evolve in the new world?
Yeah, so we're getting a lot of feedback. One on again, sustainability is the core focus, and everybody is on that net zero carbon, trajectory, and trying to understand how they will do that. And the second aspect that we see is how is the workspace being used, and how offices, what offices have to offer to the tenants. So the other impact that we see is everything that's got to do with social utility, and how that is essentially impacting the offices. But of course, it's not just offices that you mentioned. There are similar impact in terms of for the retail sector, as you well know, which is being challenged by that has been challenged by COVID, for example, but also in terms of logistics. Also, logistics are particular assets. Obviously, there's the whole question about what is the environmental impact about these assets and the social impact of these assets on the community.
Indeed. Well, it's been fascinating as ever to talk to you, Cyril. And what are future plans that you can share with us? Anything you can share with us about the future for RQR and what you'll be doing to increase the reach, the kind of assets, the kind of people you're working with?
Yeah. So to date, I think again it's a very good question, because to date I think our core customer base has been the asset managers, and what we talked about here today is the RQR rating, which is essentially a certified rating. We now have two types of ratings. So the first one is the certified rating, and the second is essentially a rating which is based on more straightforward, I would say, less complex data points, which are linked to the characteristics of the building. So, for example, its location, its address, whether this is a period building, a standard building, or a large tower, the date of construction, the last date of renovation, and from that we're able to infer essentially a quality signal of these assets. So the next steps for us is to really move and become more public and provide the whole entire real estate community with access to that data to better understand well, individual assets, group of assets, or what's happening in a market. So really, we're moving into market insight, which can be used by a much wider community. And we will be launching an app that will essentially allow any real estate market participant to get access to that data, to get access to location score, to get access to building scores based on that quality signal. We'll be launching that shortly before the end of the year.
That's great. And one last final question. I know you and I have spoken around the whole area of automated valuation, and obviously in the commercial sector, you do have, much more heterogeneous, as they say, much more varied assets than you do have in residential, where you have all these homogeneous assets where houses quite often are very similar at scale in terms of data and the number of houses. How much do you think that the valuation process for commercial real estate can be automated using data that you're producing and other pieces of data as well? What are your thoughts on that as a last question, Cyril?
Well, I think automation is a big word, and I think we're not quite there yet. Simply because I think the real estate community has started its digital process. We're seeing obviously the emergence of BIM, as you know, but also an increased use of BMS in order to capture that data. But there's a whole entire subject within the real estate industry about data, what data to capture and to what end. And I think that whole entire automated process will take some time to conclude. I think we're only at the beginning of the journey, because I think that that whole data strategy, which firms are starting to implement, will take some time to filter through. And it's the key to essentially automating. So I think there will be always a mix of automation and at the end of the day, human or intervention. This is what real estate is about at the end of the day. So I don't think the human element will ever go away. What automation will do is that it will facilitate the job of various people, whether they are valuers, property managers, facility managers, etc., and allow people to really concentrate on how to create value, how to change standing assets for the better.
Well, that's great, Cyril, and I think we could discuss that topic perhaps in our next episode, because that's a really interesting topic, that whole digital journey that the built environment needs to take. But for today, thanks as ever for your time, Cyril. Enjoy the conversation and speak to you soon.
Thank you, Andrew.